Today I had the pleasure of speaking with Anton Reza. He dropped out at 19 and is the former CTO of Clover Labs, one of the fastest growing startups in Canada. We got into how he pulled off the dropout, why distribution is the real mo right now, and what it looks like to stay technical as a CTO. We also talked about what he looks for when he's hiring and the unique edge Canadian startups have over our neighbors down south. Anton recently left Clover, but we recorded this a few months ago while he was still the CTO. Anton, thank you so much for joining. Really excited for this chat.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Likewise.
Awesome. Why don't we get right into it? Walk me through your story from Ottawa to now.
All right. Um, I moved to Ottawa, let's say coming up for 5 years now. When I moved to Ottawa, I wasn't really much in the startup space. I've always loved building. I think my story of building goes way before 5 years ago. It probably goes back 15 years ago or so. Like I grew up playing with a lot of Legos. I touched my first lines of code at, I think I was like 11. And then I did a lot of stuff on microcontrollers throughout high school, just like tinkering and making stuff just for fun. Around the time I moved to Ottawa, that's when I started university. And all of a sudden I got a much wider exposure to people, building companies, doing tech stuff. Always knew I wanted to get in tech. I didn't really know how, and I didn't really realize the possibilities of like what could be done. And so around that time, started going to university, met a lot of cool people, joined computer science clubs, joined hackathon organizations, the hackathon clubs in a sense. And that's when I really realized the amount of opportunity, like what can be done and how much you can do just by like being slightly above average or doing a little bit more than the bare minimum, the amount of opportunities you can get doing that. And yeah, I did an internship at a medium-ish sized company working on some health tech products. And then I worked at a couple of different startups. And just over time, every single company that I worked at after the other, I learned more and more of like what's possible. And, that eventually led me to start building my own stuff.
Wow, that's awesome. What was the first thing that you built that really hooked you into the love for building?
Okay, I remember this really vividly for some reason. This was probably like 15 years ago. There was like this one event happening at the ROM for the non-Canadians. That's the Royal Ontario Museum. They have a lot of dinosaur fossils and a lot of rare minerals in there. They had this one event where you could take as many Legos as you want, but the catch is you have to build something with it. And then so I was like, okay, well, I'm incentivized to build like the biggest thing possible. So I just like started building. I don't remember what I made, but I made something pretty big. It was like, I remember it was like pretty heavy for me to carry on my own. I think that like that's the earliest thing of like what got me into building. But I'm going to say like there's a follow up to this, which is like the thing that really got me into software engineering, like, using code to build stuff, when I was in high school. So this was around the time that I was like tinkering and playing around with microcontrollers. I had a very weird interest with programmable LED strips. So if you've ever seen like those LED strips that people hang up in their bedrooms, there's like this very specific type that you can, instead of setting the color across the whole strip, you can set the color for each individual light, and you can do like some really cool effects with that. So I was like building and tinkering out, playing with those, like trying to sync them to music and whatever. But I was taking a shop class at the same time in high school, and our end of year project was you had to build something that was relevant to your life. And I decided that, well, I'm doing a lot of like microcontroller stuff. I can build a housing for all the components. So it was a housing for like the microcontrollers, the power supply, the wires, and then easy ways to like plug in the lights, in a sense. And when I made that, I, installed all the little electronic devices in that enclosure. I realized that by combining like the skills that I have, like that I learned in shop classes with coding, I could literally build anything. And that was like the actual inflection point that really got me down this path of like really, really building specifically with code.
That's so cool. So You dropped out at 19. What was the conversation with your parents like when that happened? And I saw a post on your LinkedIn talking a bit about this, so I think this would be really interesting.
Yeah. So to be completely honest with you, there really wasn't a conversation. I didn't actually tell them that I was going to drop out. And I never actually told them up until now. I very much soft launched the idea where it was like, hey, by the way, I'm working part time at the startup. It's a pretty cool job. I'm going to check it out. That turned into, oh, by the way, I'm full time, so I'm just taking a little time off of school. I'm going back next semester. It's just an internship. Don't worry about it. And then the next semester rolled around. It's like, yeah, I'm going to do another semester at this company. And then that kind of just like compounded, and that was like extended over a year. And I think eventually they got the idea, or they understood that I'm like not going to go back. Although although they understand that I'm probably not going back, at least not anytime soon. The question this still does come up pretty often, like, hey, like, did you register for classes? I would get asked that a lot, probably up until like early to mid last year. And yeah, I'd always like kind of, redirect the question, or delay the answer by a bit. But the reason that I was able to do this is because like I was financially self-sufficient this entire time. So although yes, I did still, I did still live with my parents. I wasn't like, they weren't giving me any money. I was also like contributing to the household for like, utilities, groceries, wherever I can, pretty much. And because I was not on their payroll in a sense, like I could have a little bit more autonomy. I think the biggest thing that people need to realize is that if you're going to drop out, or if you're going to take extended time away from school, you have to make sure that you are not on your parents' payroll, because if you are, you have no right to go against like what they want, right? You're basically working for them, right? If they're paying you, you have to listen to what they say. And so if you want to go against the norm, if you want to like do something risky or weird, take time away from school, go travel across the world, try to build a company, like you have to get off of their payroll. And once you do, the rest of the conversations become much easier. And yeah, so I think it's like, number one, like I was financially self-sufficient this whole time. And then number two, I kind of like, sort of rolled into it. I didn't, bring it up all at once.
Hmm. How would you recommend someone weigh those pros and cons if they are thinking about dropping out or even just taking an extended period of time off of school? What do you think they should think about when they're factoring those in, whether that's to start their own thing or to work at a startup?
I mean, I think the first thing that everybody should do, and I would assume that majority of like the younger people listening to this, and I think yourself and a lot of your peers are also in this position, which is like, you know, take an intern, like do internships first, like do your summer internships, and then if you like really really love your summer internship, like see if you can extend that into fall. I'm curious, have you ever thought of like extending your thing, into fall? Because I think you did something before, right?
So when I was at RBC for the year, I ended up extending that into the fall just because I was
Mhm.
thinking I definitely want more experience before I graduate. And so I ended up doing a year there, and then now I'm at Bordy. And it's been so fun that there's a part of me that I have 8 months left of school, but there's part of me that's like, I just want to keep working,
Yeah.
whether it's here, elsewhere. So that'll be a decision that I'll have to make. But yeah, so I need this advice as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think what you're doing right now is perfect in the sense that you haven't like made the decision that you're going to take extended time away from school. It just kind of happened naturally, right? Like you had your first internship at RBC, and you extended that for a little bit. So you're like you mentioned, you were there for a year, and then now you're at Bordy, and now you're thinking of like extending your Bordy internship into the fall. I think that's what most people should do, because that was also kind of like my intention, right? When I started working, I always had the intention of going back to school. I was like, hey, like, let me
Mm.
take some extra time off. I really want to see where this goes. And then when I eventually did like, properly drop out, that's when things were going so well, relatively speaking, to the point that it financially did not make sense to go back to school. Um, a lot of people will drop out to just like say they dropped out, or a lot of people drop out because like they don't have the discipline to stay in school. They want to like say they're doing something else. But I think that's the wrong way to go about it. Like you have to be doing something first, and then it has to get to a point where you are so busy that you literally do not have time for school, so that you will take like extended time off. I think that's the path that most successful people have gone down if they were to drop out. But at the same time, like keep in mind the vast majority of like successful people, even in startups, even startup founders, finished university. So like this path is not for everybody. I think that I say this as a dropout that everybody listening to this should go to university or college if you're American. And you should like almost naturally be forced out of school by whatever you're doing. It should never be the other way around.
That's super helpful. I'd love to talk about Clover, which is obviously where you've been building for the past year and a bit. When did distribution click for you guys as the real game?
Yeah, so all of the founding team at Clover ran their own companies. Like we all had our own companies before this. And I think any founder will realize this eventually. So there's this saying that we used to have, which was first time founders focus on product, while second time founders focus on distribution. And the reason that holds true is because a lot of people who are become founders, they do it because they love like making stuff, and I find that they're so good at making stuff that other people would use it, right? And they're so hyper focused on making a perfect product that they completely ignore like the sales side, and then you will eventually realize, well, you've built this amazing product. Well, now you need to go and get people to use it, and so that's kind of like what we went through as well. And the concept of Clover was that we want to build go to market tools that we wish we had when we were running our old companies.
That's so cool. And as someone who's built a number of side projects, it's always so much easier to make the choice to just keep making the product better versus that
Yeah.
just actually doing the hard part and getting
Mhm.
to doing the distribution. So
Yeah.
I totally feel that. And it's such a need.
I think it's all the flip side is also true, right? Like the where we say that because we're technical people, but at the same time, there's non-technical founders who would rather sell a product. I think this is a lot of salespeople do this. Well, they just like will sell stuff. We're like sales based or sales focused founders. They'll just sell stuff without it actually existing before, which by the way is kind of the proper way to go about it. But there's always a balance, right? Like you don't want to go crazy on building a product that no one's using. And at the same time, you don't want to go crazy on selling a product to so many people that doesn't exist or doesn't exist fully. So there's always that balance.
Hmm. For for people who are wanting to get into building things and maybe they're in school and they haven't built a whole lot. They've gone to a couple hackathons, but haven't built things that got real users. What's some advice that you would give to those people?
Um, It's hard because the best things to build are those that are relevant to your life. And not it's not always that those things will be relevant to others. At the same time, you should also realize that if you can benefit from something, if you're building something that will benefit you, chances are it will benefit other people as well. Unless it's like super, super hyper specific to you, which like 99% of the time it's not. There's always ways to go and market those products, right? Whether it's product hunt, posting it on Reddit or, building a following and eventually posting it on your other social medias. There's always ways to market stuff to get used by other people. But if you do indeed find yourself at this spot where you're building a lot of cool stuff that you think is beneficial, but other people aren't using it, you can always get like inspiration from platforms like Product Hunt, or also um, there are like SaaS marketplaces like TrustServer or Acquire.com that you can filter to see like what kind of companies are being sold that are kind of like earlier stage, kind of, between that, 100 to 5,000 MRR, and then see what people are using, or see what people are building there, and then take some ideas from there and see, if there's like a ed tech app that's doing something quite specific that you think is interesting, that you think you have an edge in, you can go and build something like that as well. And the idea is more or less validated because somebody else is making money doing that. You can go and put your unique spin onto it, and And that way, there is a user base. And if you still don't have users, then you should focus on the actual distribution or the actual marketing side of it.
That's such solid advice. What is the principle behind how your growth agents work? Without giving away the secret sauce of Clover, maybe you could talk about that a little.
Sure, yeah. I think marketing has gone very organic. Facebook ads with the whole drop shipping era had its time back in like what 2016. I'm not saying that traditional advertising is dead. It's not. It's changed quite a bit, but it's still very relevant. But if you look at all of the latest brands and all of the latest products, they're all doing sort of like user generated content or it's like user led marketing in a sense. Like every single ecom brand out there right now is doing UGC. And then even like the SaaS products too, like even they're doing like founder led marketing, or something like very organic. So, find where your users are, see like where they live, where they spend their most time on the internet, and then go and get your name out there in an organic way. You don't want to do it spam because people are really good at calling out spam, especially people, in our generation. So, for the older generations, they might not necessarily see the spam stuff quite yet, but they're going to catch on eventually. But for us, like if someone's like trying to spam their product or over promote, like we can just pick up on that real quick. Um, so yeah, you don't want to be too spammy, but just find where your ideal customers spend their time on the internet and go there and, get yourself known over there.
For people who don't know how Clover works or what its main products are, do you want to speak to that a little?
Yeah, sure. So we have two main products, in addition to one support product. So the supporting product is called OnePrice. That's kind of what we built before Clover as a concept was born. And so that's a price experiment tool for companies, particularly SaaS companies, using Stripe as their payment processor. So it lets you A/B test different pricing models to see which one results in the most upfront revenue as well as long-term revenue. As for our growth-focused tools, we have one called Red Rover, which is kind of like a Reddit-first SEO GEO tool. We also do a lot of blog generation, so auto blog posting, and we'll handle everything for you. So if you want to improve your SEO, GEO, and AEO. So that's search engine optimization, generative engine optimization, and answer engine optimization. If you want to improve those, you can definitely use Red Rover. Our second product is called Echoes. It's an AIGC platform, so it allows you to essentially create fresh content, reuse existing content, edit it automatically, and post it all across a network of rented accounts. So if you're an ecom brand, for example, and you have a bunch of UGC content that you just have, but it's only been posted once, you can come to us and then we'll help you in a sense like repurpose that content and take it out to a much wider audience. And we also have like the AIUGC side, which lets you play with like AIUGC characters and then go and do the same thing of like distribute that content across multiple accounts.
That is so cool. And is that what you guys have been recently more focused on, or?
Yeah, so Echoes is the one that we've been focused on recently. We've just had, I don't know about just, but not too long ago, we did like an internal beta release. So a lot of our existing Red Rover customers who would be good Echoes ICP, we've started letting them use it. And then I think we'll be doing a public launch pretty soon.
That's awesome. So you're still a top contributor or committer while managing 10 people. Why is that the right call?
It's a few more than 10 people now, but you know, a lot of larger companies, they're like managers or like engineering managers or like technical PMs don't really get into the code base much more. And I can understand why that happens. However, at a startup, if you're still actively growing, you should be like directly involved. For example, like the technical lead, so the CTO or maybe like director of engineering should always be writing code. Your director of sales should actively be on sales calls. Trying to think what would be the other one. Like, I don't know, maybe like, the CEO or like the COO should be actively like going on like job interviews, meaning like when people are interviewing with for roles at your company, like the highest, like the CEO or like the highest level sort of founder or executive should also be on those calls. So it's really important as a manager to be an individual contributor in your field or in your department, just because you really need to know what's happening, kind of like boots on the ground. And so coming back to tech stuff specifically, well, if I'm not actively in the code base, if I'm not writing code, well, I'm not going to be seeing a lot of issues that the team may overlook, or they might think it's like too small of an issue to bring up. And so that will let me basically call out those issues and make sure that they're action, and just have a sort of a better developer quality of life, or a better developer experience on the team. The other part also is just so you can stay on top of, like, the trends, and make sure like you don't lose your edge, you don't lose your skills. They're just kind of saying that game recognizes game. So if you're really good at what you do, you can recognize other people who are really good at what they do. And well, if you haven't written a line of code in like 2 years, chances are you're not the engineer you were 2 years ago. And it becomes a lot more difficult to recognize who's a good engineer today. So I think it's a combination of those two. There's a lot of many other reasons to that. But yeah, you definitely, like, you want to make sure that you know exactly what's happening in your company as an individual contributor. But you also want to stay on top of your skills too.
Hmm. And what does a real day look like for you?
I don't know. I don't know if there's like a one answer to this.
I'm
It's
sure
like
it
all
widely
over the
varies.
place. Yeah, it
Yeah.
varies a lot. Like, it even varies week by week. Like, it varies day by day, week by week, like sometimes month by month. I mean, I'm in a lot more calls than I should be. Yeah, I'm in like director level calls, or like director level meetings. I have one-on-ones with the team. I have like stand-ups because we have multiple teams now. So I'm in all of those stand-ups. So it really depends. I'm gonna say about right now, about half of my time is spent on sort of like management level stuff. So whether that's like being in meetings, that's having one-on-ones, joining stand-ups, or being on on linear or project management tool, making sure that things are all on schedule and going according to plans. That takes about half of my time. And then the other half is actually spent like doing, writing code and building features.
At what team size does this stop working with you being able to contribute on the level that you are now?
I'm gonna say it's kind of starting to happen now. Back when I was like still the top contributor to our code base, that's when we were about 10 people. We're about 14 now. And so it's kind of like starting to slip a bit. I'm no longer the top contributor on it. And I want to say, like, just gradually kind of, you know, steeps down, or like goes down from here, meaning that I spend less time on the code base. But my goal is always to kind of keep a baseline of like 20% of my time in a given week, or maybe a given month, should be doing individual contribution work. And so it's my goal to keep that. So one of the things that I've done already is I've hired a technical PM, and I've hired kind of like an engineering manager type of role. And so that allows me to spend less time on the tedious side of management, right? Like, there's still the people side of things that I cannot delegate, at least not yet. Uh, yeah, the tedious engineering management side, whether it's like assigning tasks in linear or whatnot, like I've already started to delegate that off. So it's kind of, I would say, like, right now, it's actually getting to a point where that rule of like 50-50 is starting to fall off. And then I expect it to continue to fall as we grow. But the goal is always to maintain at least 20% of my time on IC work.
That's great, and I totally see the value in that. You spent 30 minutes writing rejection feedback for a candidate that you interviewed. What's the most common thing that you tell people?
Um, I would say it goes to like the most important thing that we look for, which is a high, like, it's a combination of the two things, right? So we look for high agency and we look for raw skill. So most of our rejections happen off of a combination of those two, and then that also stems like into the feedback that I write. The raw skill, I think that really goes down to talent. Although there's this saying that hard work beats talent when talent doesn't work. So I know some incredibly intelligent people who just like aren't very driven. And then I know a lot of extremely driven people who might not be naturally intelligent, but their hard work makes up for it. Like, they, if there's something that they don't know, they'll spend a little bit more time learning it, or something within, along those lines. And so, and yeah, so then coming back to like the feedback that I write is like, hey, you need to be really smart. Like, you need to be good at what you do. And if you're not kind of like, in a sense, like, good enough, I hate using that term, but if you're not really good enough to meet the bar to join the team, well, I'll tell you where you're lacking. Right? So I'll be like, hey, maybe like you spent a little bit too much time struggling on why this component was in an infinite re-render loop. And I'll tell you like exactly what to do, and then I'll like share some resources. Like, check this out. Like there's this really good playlist on React fundamentals that'll help you avoid these sort of issues. And then so that's like the sales side. The agency side is the part that's really hard to give feedback on. It's like either you're a high agency or not. Like that's just like a drive thing. You can't teach it. But yeah, so it all the feedback always stems down to those two. It's like you need to be really, really good at what you do. And then you also need to have like extreme drive, which leads to being a high agency person.
With the rise of AI assisted development, how have you seen the most important skills that developers have change, if at all?
I would say that my answer is going to be pretty controversial, which is like obviously with these AI tools, you need to know how to use them effectively. Like that's a given. You have to know that. If you don't, you're going to fall behind. At the same time, I think that your raw engineering skills, and ability to like know best practices, like hey, like maybe don't. I don't want to use like too many technical terms, but the raw engineering skills and the best practices experience, in a sense, is really important as well, because the AI coding tools basically are a force multiplier. So if you're kind of like a quote unquote 10x engineer before AI tools came around, well, those tools are going to make you like 100 or 1000x engineer. Whereas if you weren't, you're going to be like a 0.01x engineer. And so like you really, honestly, all it is a force multiplier, right? Well, the baseline is knowing how to use them effectively, but also you really need to know of like, hey, like, I'm building this very specific service to do this thing. There's a good way to build it. Like there's the cheap, sloppy way to build it. And then there's like the proper way, the high quality way to build it. And like knowing that will like transcend you to like that next level, because the amount of like slop code that is being written nowadays is I mean even to me it gets a little frustrating. I can only imagine how frustrating it is to people who have been in this industry for a lot longer. So yeah, it's just like know how to use your tools properly, and then have like a good understanding of best practices and like engineering practices in general.
That's such a good way to think about it, because if you have no base, then there's nothing to multiply on. And so
Yeah,
yeah, you are
yeah,
just going to
exactly.
be a
Like,
0.1x engineer.
yeah, like 0 times 100 is still 0, 0.1, times 10 is like 1.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. That's so true. And what's a signal in an interview that isn't on a resume for you?
The ability to talk about a concept really passionately, like really allows you to see like who cares and who doesn't. A big part of startups is that you have to care about what you're building. It's not like a corporate environment where you like clock in at 5, clock in at 9 and then clock out at 5 and just never think about it. Like even if you're working like relatively comfortable hours at a startup, you're still thinking about the problems all the time. And the way that I'm able to see for people who are able to think about those problems all the time out of passion is like, I'll ask you a question. I'll ask you a technical concept that you might be familiar about. And then I'll be like, hey, like, tell me about this, or what are your thoughts on this type of concept or this type of technology? If somebody's able to not just give a simple answer, but really go deep into that answer, like keep talking and keep sharing more things, that really goes to show that, hey, like this person is not only are they really smart, but they really care about what they're doing and they really love what they're doing as well.
That's very true and super helpful for people. Honestly, what does Canada have that San Francisco doesn't?
So people out in the Bay, really, or just honestly Silicon Valley. Actually, no, I'm gonna say yeah. People out in San Francisco have like these crazy big ideas that anywhere else you would be called an idiot or like you'd be called crazy. I mean, because they are crazy. If you kind of think about a lot of like the technological concepts that we have today that are just standard now. 20 years ago, 20 years ago, sorry, 30 years ago, if I were to tell you that we were talking on this video chat right now, or, we were recording this in a 4K resolution in real time without like any major drop in quality on a personal computer that weighs less than a kilogram. you would call me insane, right? And today it's just a normal thing, right? And so that's why SF or Silicon Valley in general has really exceeded in building out this disruptive tech. Whereas on the flip side, Canadians know how to run a sustainable business. You have a lot of startups that will just die because they're perfectly valid ideas and that have a lot of adoption, but they will just die because they run out of funding, they're not able to secure another round, or they're just spending way too much, uncontrollably, recklessly. Whereas on the flip side, people in Canada really know how to run a business, and that stems down to the fundamental economies. Like the US is very much like financial sector and do crazy risky things, whereas Canada is very safe, right? There's a reason that Canada was affected significantly less back during the 2008 housing crisis than the US was, right? And that goes, that kind of stems from like the really strict and more conservative banking practices. Also, the industries that we have, like the mining, like they're all very safe industries. And that touches technology as well, because for the people who will start running tech startups and technology businesses, they'll be a lot more conservative and a lot more careful about how they spend the money, the type of stuff that they work on. And yeah, it's like if you want to like go do something really crazy, like some sort of absurd disruptive technology, like SF is always the place to be. But Canada and Toronto being the largest city in Canada is really has this advantage because people here, they're very business minded, like they know how to run a sustainable business.
Hmm. That's really interesting. I never thought about it that way before. Okay. So what is a project that someone could ship this month that would get your attention?
So all of the stuff that we've been doing lately is turning our growth pipelines to a very agentic thing. A big part of this is giving LLMs in a sense taste. And so it's very easy to define or tell an LLM, hey, I need you to monitor this specific social media channel anytime we have a mention that comes up that is asking about our company or a competitor's company. You can just tell it to like go and reply, right? But the challenge now becomes of like, what do you actually want to reply to versus not reply? What do you want to, and then when you do go ahead and reply to something, like how do you actually like, how do you write something that doesn't sound spammy, right? It's not even sound AI because we're past that. Like, it's very easy to make short pieces of content sound real. How do you make it sound like authentic? And then the second part to that of like the taste side is when you're making content on social media, like specifically like TikTok, YouTube Shorts, Instagram, the carousel feature, right? Like it's a very easy format, which is like you have a good hook, like a proper image, you have text on top of the image. There's a lot of really simple formats that consumer startups or consumer companies will be using to gain traction. As a person, it's very easy to write like what sounds authentic and what sounds real, but it's harder to get LLMs to write stuff that sounds creative. And so this is a really hard problem that there's also quite a few YC startups that are trying to solve this concept of like how do you give a large language model taste, pretty much. And so I'd love to see stuff like that. If somebody can figure out how to like actually write authentic content from a large language model, it doesn't have to be like long form content, like even just like slideshows, like being able to choose like on a typical UGC carousel where you're writing text over different slides, like how do you write that text? It's like, it's like 5 to 6 words. How do you actually write that text to sound real? And so, yeah, so this whole concept of giving AI models and more specifically LLMs taste is something that I've been really interested, something that we're working on. A lot of companies are working on. Yeah, someone has done this and they've done it to a pretty good degree. I'd love to see it. And that's a great way to get my attention.
Awesome. And where can people find you?
The best place to find me is on X. You can reach out to me. You can also find me on LinkedIn. I check LinkedIn maybe once or twice a week, but yeah, if you want to like follow along more so like what I'm doing, what I'm thinking, definitely check out my Twitter profile.
Awesome. Thank you so much for your time, Anton. You have some pretty cool insights into a lot of things, so it was awesome hearing those.
Thank you so much. Talk to you later.